Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Phil, good morning to you. Uh, this is a very exciting series that we have been doing for, as I said, last few months now, and as part of that series, we wanted to address. I think we all have spent enough time now, in the safe environment of working from home and doing stuff differently than we did previously, and have kind of adjusted well to the post-COVID world. And we thought this was the right time to bring in, half. The post-COVID world and the software ecosystem therein, will function from specifically, software testing and software quality perspective. And we want to bring in continuous testing as a core, aid in this entire process, and want to share our knowledge with you on that front. So I'm Deepak. I head QMetry's marketing practice, and I also manage my channel partner program for QMetry. That's a little bit about me. QMetry, again, has been there in this business for many years now. We have been operating since 2009, and we have our focus on test management, test automation, and quality analytics. I'll talk a little bit more about it. Some housekeeping items, that we should go through it. I hope you are all able to see our videos. If you're not, just raise your hand, or put that in the chat box, and we'll help you out with that. I hope you are able to see our presentation. Again, the same thing. If you're not able to see it, let us know, and we'll help you out with that. Uh, there's a Q&A panel in your, that you would see. You can put your questions there, and yeah, we will, as I said, we will either take it as part of the conversation. If it it's at the right time, we will just add it into the conversation. If not, after the session, we would have a Q&A round where we will take up those questions, right? And you will definitely receive a recording of this webinar post the webinar is done. The webinar hashtag is continuous testing, hashtag continuous testing. If you want to use that, tweet about it, or put a LinkedIn post about it. So that's it. Again, I'm welcoming you all. I gave you a little bit perspective on who I am. Qmetry, as I mentioned, is a continuous testing platform that offers test management, test automation, and quality analytics. And then we have our speaker, Philip Liu from XBOSoft. He's a CEO of XBOSoft. Uh, More than that, he has been a speaker and contributor in terms of blogs, articles at multiple publications. He's been speaking at multiple forums, and has has been into this field since very long. He started XBOSoft in 2006, and has been successfully running the company, which is headquartered in San Francisco and has offices in China, and development center in China overall. And again, XBSoft's clear focus is on uh, clear focus on quality and assurance. That's their focus. They are doing it all across the across the board, as I go, right? So uh, uh, as they go. So I think that's the Phil. Without further ado, over to you. Please add more if I've missed out some points, but maybe if you want to give a quick introduction of yourself, other than what I gave overall.
Yeah, go back one slide, and I just want to look at that picture of me. That's a really old picture, probably about 9 months old. So as you can see, I don't look like that anymore. But a lot has happened in COVID, right? So all of our conferences have gone virtual, and as a matter of fact, I just was the chair of a conference, the Pacific Northwest Software Quality Conference, and it was all virtual, and it went very well. I think, the virtual world has some pluses and some minuses, and we're going to be talking about that today, with reference to continuous testing. So I look forward to having a good conversation with you, Deepak.
Hmm. Thanks, Phil. Okay, so the first question, Phil, I think, we have seen, as you mentioned, we have seen a new normal. 2020 has been an amazing year in terms of, things going wrong, in multiple in multiple ways. In Bay Area, we have seen it as well. I think, COVID-19 has been a global phenomena which has changed the way things have been happening. And that is also what we have seen from business perspective. There's a lot of digital transformation push which is happening across the industry. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
industry verticals, and people are transacting more online, and that is increase the amount of software that's been developed, and increase the demand on the quality as well. So I wanted to know, and again, this is going to remain for a while, as we all see different articles and different surveys that come up, that till the vaccine comes out, we are, and then after that as well, a few more months and years, I think we'll see an impact of it. So how companies, according to you, and have adopted to the situation, what different things that they've done, is what according to you.
Well, of course, everyone is using these remote tools like we are today, Zoom and GoToWebinar and so on. And I think one of the things that we don't realize is that in terms of really optimizing the use of these tools, I take part in a lot of Scrum meetings every week, and when you think about it, so much of human communication is in body language, right? So what's missing from a Scrum meeting where everybody's standing around looking at each other face to face and talking to each other versus a virtual Scrum meeting where the Scrum Master is showing their screen, and you see a bunch of pictures basically, and you're hearing a bunch of words, and you have to look and see, maybe that person, so that those words go with this picture, but maybe you don't, right? And so in order to optimize the usage of these tools, I think that teams really need to think about the nonverbal communication that happens. And if I just show my picture here, what would be the effect of just showing my picture, but you seeing my voice or hearing my voice in the webinar? And also, what would it be like if you saw me looking over here while I was talking or something like that, right? Would that have the same effect and uh, be able to communicate the same message than if I look directly at you, theoretically you, in the camera lens? So I think each of us really has to think um, carefully about how we can really optimize the use of the tools. And as development teams, I think this is really, really important. We don't really realize how important it is to really look into the camera just like you're looking at a real person, and you don't want to be looking up here or looking over there. Sometimes you do have to because you want to look at your screen and so on. But just like you would be in a real meeting, you should look directly at the people that you're working with. So, um, and that really helps a lot because, especially in virtual meetings, you may be working with a new person, maybe, especially in the last 9 months, right? There's new people coming on board, and they may have an accent that you don't quite understand that well. But when you can see the face and see the context of what's going on, it's much, much easier to communicate. So, um, Zoom is exhausting, I would say, especially for introverts like myself. Um, but I would really recommend for development teams to adapt to this because, like you said, Deepak, it's really a long-term thing. I would say it's probably going to last maybe even another year where we have to work virtually together.
Hmm.
And I'd recommend really, really grabbing use of these tools and optimizing their usage.
Hmm. Super observation there. I think, yes, everything is changing. There's a lack of physical communication, so it's more virtual. And I think bringing in that filling up for that physical touch is very important in terms of your communication. I think working remote is going to be a norm for a while, as you mentioned. I think another thing that I feel, most of our most of the people are facing is creating a separation between personal and professional life, because they are all the physical space at their home is kind of merged into one. And I think that is also a pretty important thing. And I recently Microsoft talked about giving flexibility to employees in terms of how to choose, how they can choose, and from where they can work. So I think some of those things will have a long term impact. So according to you, how agile teams have adopted to this change, or adapted to this change, and in your personal experience as well, what different things that you've seen, in terms of their usage of tools, or their usage of how they've changed the way development processes is taken care of.
Well, because there's less, like we said earlier, physical contact and less actual face-to-face working together, we're not side by side anymore. So things have to be more transparent in a digital form. And remember when when we were in college, and the professor had office hours, and you could only go see the professor if you had questions during those office hours. And that's what I'm finding in terms of some of the teams that I work on, is that we all have to have a common time that we're in the office, so to speak, so that we can actually really work together and have impromptu type questions, because a lot of times thoughts come out when it's not actually during a formal meeting, right? So
Mhm.
I think it's important for us to adapt in that way, to have quote unquote office hours where we're actually really available and our butt is in the seat in order for us to collaborate together. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be 5 hours. It can be whatever works for the team. And tools in terms of increasing the transparency to take the place of working side by side 8 hours a day. We need those kinds of things too, and those can be as simple as a shared notepad over the cloud, to more sophisticated development tools, moving cards around and so on, and setting up procedures for using those tools. And so optimizing the use of these tools that help us to develop and collaborate, such as um, Jira and some of the test management platforms or test management plugins that go inside Jira. I've seen companies that they use these tools, but they're just so non-standardly implemented that it makes it very difficult to find things or to know when status changes and things like that. So it's important for us as development organizations to not only just get the tool and start using it, but really standardize the use of it. And that could be standard ways of using the cards and moving those cards around, um, standard naming conventions for different types of issues, things like that. Um, that makes it easier to find things for all of us that are working together virtually.
Interesting. So in this process, have you found anything, limiting, which is kind of, only can be done while in office, or do you think that, that threshold is already kind of, crossed, and, most of the things can be managed remotely? And this is a very loaded question.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I think that just about everything can be handled remotely, but it needs to be done in different contexts and forms. So a lot of times, one-on-one conversation is needed, right? So you cannot just solve everything with big meetings, because it just doesn't work that way in terms of two humans connecting and communicating with each other. So um, I find it very, very productive to just pick up the phone and call somebody and talk to them. We're exchanging 10 emails, and I said, wait a second, let's just talk to each other for 5 minutes and that will solve the problem, right? So I think it's important to understand when it's time to pick up the phone and use the old fashioned means versus using some of the advanced tools that we have.
Interesting. Coming to the important factor of, and this is a very radical point that I kind of, I have been thinking about, and I wanted to ask you about it, because you are already running a business which is multi-locational. So in terms of talent, does this new normal open up an opportunity for you to hire talent, from anywhere, or is it a pipe dream?
No, it's certainly not a pipe dream. We've been doing it pre-COVID, and it's a big issue actually, and it's you could say opening up a can of worms in a way. In the Bay Area, you live in the Bay Area as well, Deepak. A lot of the big tech companies are saying, "Oh yeah, we're going to work remote forever." And so, what does that mean? Well, it means you can move away from the Bay Area and not have to pay for such expensive housing, right?
Mhm.
Um, but you can even think much bigger than that in terms of moving to Spain, or, some people are moving to Sacramento, or, little places outside of the Bay Area. But, you can move anywhere. And that means that you could also hire from anywhere, right? As long as the time zones can be worked out in terms of, like I said, creating those common office hours of working together. And for some of our offices that are remote, we've actually changed office hours in order to accommodate this, in order to have more working time together. Actually changing office hours, working from 4 in the afternoon to midnight or whatever. I guess you could say the night shift. Nobody wants to work, during the middle of the night, but adapting a little bit in order to accommodate working, and to facilitate working together. I think that's going to happen. And that means really hiring from all over the world, like you said, Deepak. And it doesn't have to be in Silicon Valley. And I guess the only thing is, some of the tech companies here in Silicon Valley have said, well, that's fine. You can move to Idaho, but we're not going to pay you the same amount of money. And so that's a whole other issue. That's really just that's the whole issue of outsourcing, right? In a way, because you're hiring somebody from a different location where it's cheaper to live there, right? So there's no different than paying a cheaper price in Idaho versus paying some person in Vietnam or the Philippines. They're going to be cheaper because their cost of living is cheaper. So it's opening up things very interesting in a very interesting way.
Interesting. Okay, so let's bring the discussion, towards more on the software testing part of it, and how testing organizations are changing, and what are the major challenges according to you? Because you work with multiple, customers who are right now dealing with those challenges. So, what are major challenges that you have seen with them, specifically their testing organization in these times?
Well, there's a lot of challenges in testing, as you know, and originally the challenge in testing was to somehow migrate from the waterfall thinking, I'll say, rather than model waterfall thinking of testing after development gave you a build, so to speak. Um,
Mhm.
and then, so then we started thinking, okay, well, we have to test faster. We have to test within these small cycles, and so on. And so there are many organizations that still have that mindset and still trying to keep up and have the traditional role of testers. Um, I like to think of it in terms of quality rather than testing, and testing, applying testing concepts to different parts of the development cycle in ensuring quality. And so, traditionally we think of testers as people that write test cases and execute them against the software and the build and different platforms and so on. And if you think about it, if you want to have continuous testing, or what I call continuous quality, where would you apply these testing concepts within the development life cycle? Well, you'd apply it all over the place, right? So that means testing the requirements. That means testing the the transition from each individual developer and putting those pieces together in the integration of the code, and testing all over. And that includes testing after the fact, right? So testing, looking at data from the customer service and technical support areas, because that's quality too, right? So if you think of it in terms of continuous quality, there's all kinds of work that needs to be done outside of the traditional development cycle.
Mhm. Interesting. So, we are a continuous testing tools company, and some of the challenges that we have seen with our customer is the point that is coming out majorly is, as you mentioned, there are some organizations who are still in waterfall, or they are in between waterfall and agile. So test automation is one of the major challenge that's coming out as it's a challenge, as well as it's an opportunity in terms of bringing the speed that is needed today. Test environment is another key point that comes out. How to provision test environments to really test the software with the right test coverage as well. So test coverage is an additional part to it. And then we also feel that you mentioned about test data. So test data also, the quality of test data is also a very important factor, and availability of the test data in terms of the new challenges which have arisen post COVID-19. It also requires new test data to be generated, and I think unavailability of that data is also a challenge that people have mentioned. And again, so coming back to this key points, I wanted you to help us understand each of these points in terms of the challenge and the opportunities built with that challenge for software quality organizations. So would you like to start with test automation, maybe?
Sure. I mean, I think that I talked earlier about the different types of continuous quality or continuous testing. And so test automation needs to happen at all levels. So test automation in terms of unit testing, test automation and integration testing, test automation in the continuous integration and continuous deployment. Um, you know, I recently had a conversation with a person that went to Tanzania, and they said that they came across a large bridge that went across a river, and it was not connected to the road, so they couldn't actually use the bridge. And someone says, where's this from? Oh, this was the Chinese came and built this bridge for us, but they couldn't use it. And so the whole thing about automation is that the automation needs to be contiguous from one step to the next step, right? Just like that bridge cannot be used if it cannot be connected to something else, right? And so when you think about, we used to think of automation testing as, the UI type testing.
Mhm.
That would be one step, right? And maybe another step. What would be the step before that? Well, the step before that would be the integration testing, or the unit testing. So each step within the deployment process and the development different kind of automation. It's not necessarily the typical automation that you may think of. So, for instance, you were talking about data. So getting the data and scrubbing that and making sure it's the right data in order to do the testing, that also needs to be automated. So every little piece along the step needs to be contiguous in terms of the automation.
Mhm. So another question that comes up on the automation front, and that we as a tool company also we face it from our customers, is what is the right amount of test automation, and how do we define what test cases are needed to be automated, right? So test coverage in that sense is a very important question that always is on the mind of testing organizations. So what is your take on that? How they can do it better on
Yeah, I think that Yeah, we've run into clients before that have said, "Oh yeah, we want 90% test automation, we want 100% test automation, and so on." And so, as you know, that can drive different behaviors that may not meet the goal. And so, the real goal is, well, we want to save time, right? We want to do things faster. We want to save manual hours testing, or we want to allocate these manual hours someplace else.
Mhm.
So, in terms of the percentage of automation and coverage of test automation, I really think that's the wrong way to think about things. I think we need the overall goal really is to either increase the testing that we're doing or to increase our manual attention to exploratory testing and so on. How much time do we save really? So, if you're developing a couple thousand test cases that are automated and you can say, oh, we've got 60% test automation because we have 2,000 test cases that are automated and there used to be 3,000 manual test cases, right? Something like that, two-thirds. But the question really is, how much time did you save? And so I like to think of things like that. So, if I saved, 10 hours of manual work, that's definitely a win. And maybe I can do that. Maybe I don't need to automate 2,000 test cases to do that, right? So, um, when you're looking at the things that you can automate, don't think about the numerator and denominator in terms of test cases and test coverage and 65% or whatever. I prefer to think of, how much time did I save by doing this? And maybe I can save 100 hours if I do 10 test cases, right? Just depends on what test cases those are. So picking those test cases that are difficult to do manually, that are lean themselves or lend themselves to automating, things that are prone to human error. Those are the kinds of things to go after in test automation rather than arbitrarily setting a goal that we want to be, 90% test automation and so on. It's really about achieving the goal, which I believe the goal is to save time and increase quality, right? So, um, the whole test automation coverage metric to me is very flawed and not really congruent with most people's goals, even though they think they may be.
Mhm. Very interesting point. So extending the logic there, I think we have feel this we feel the same way in terms of test environments, right? Because once you've set up the test cases and all things done, you have different platforms to have your software working on, and you need the right test environment to do it. Now, do you really create a physical environment, or you go for a virtual environment? And there are so many questions specifically in the test environment front. And I think the question that we are getting recently is also about how much of test environment coverage is also a very important factor in terms of how much optimization you can bring into test environment. Any thoughts on that, Phil?
So you're talking about the building of these virtual environments. Is that what you're talking
So
about, or?
emulators, simulators, and device labs. The device clouds. There are so many of them. Like for example, we work with Sauce Labs or Perfecto.
Mm,
Then
mm,
in
mm.
that sense, and they're expensive. Or there is a cost associated with it. So how can you really optimize on that? Is what the question is.
Yeah, so that's a good one. I think uh, choosing test environments, whether you go virtual, simulated, real devices, real operating systems, and so on, that's really requires quite a bit of experience with your software and knowing what kinds of defects occur in what types of environments. So there's sometimes, if I would say that it probably that you have to experiment, right? So you have to understand when your application needs to actually be tested on a real device and when it can get by, or you can go forward with a virtual device in a cloud environment like you were saying. But I think also people are led astray in thinking that these device farms or cloud farms are cheap. Like you said, they're not cheap. So being able to monitor your budget and figure out what kinds of things absolutely have to be tested in different environments is important. And that's
Interesting.
really depending on the application, right? And the context and the different types of features of the application that require testing in different environments. But, applying the test automation mantra, those kinds of things can be automated as well. That's another part of automation that you don't necessarily think of as automation.
Mhm. That's a very good point that you brought up at the last. Yes, it's that can be automated, or that can be delivered with a click of few buttons. And we'll talk about that more. When we talk about that, how tools play a role in this entire thing. So another important factor is the continuous feedback loop, which comes up with agile and DevOps mindset, setting in many organizations. Because I think with the traditional set of mindset, achieving continuous delivery is becoming very difficult. So in that context, what do you think, where, how organizations can specifically the testing organizations, or I would say the entire development organization, can use this continuous feedback loop, to improve the software quality at speed and continuously.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's two sources of data that I don't think are well tapped into and well used by development organizations and testing organizations. And we talked about this in another conversation, but it's the technical support and customer service. And I believe that we should, the users will tell you when they're not happy, right? And so I think a lot of folks are collecting data via Google Analytics or similar tools in terms of response times and where users are going and things like that. So that may give you some performance data and it may give you some usage data. Um, but it doesn't exactly tell you where customers are having problems. And so we can get a lot of that data from technical support. And Jira has service desks, right? So it's all integrated within the Atlassian platform, and collecting this kind of information and being able to correlate it to different issues and actually put it into your test management as well, creating
Hmm.
test cases from those things that users complain about, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I think there are a few other things that user ask for, and I think in terms of this, while definitely their test projects collects a lot of quality, or generates a lot of quality analytics and a lot of actionable insights. But I think beyond that actionable insights, I think you need this. You need to use this continuous feedback loop that is generated, specifically the support and customer services organizations. I think they are very useful in terms of generating this high quality information that can be used in creating a new user story, or a new and then subsequently improving the software itself, and then generating the test cases based on that. Or it's not just the bug information that you get, but you also get a lot of real feature improvement arguments, and supporting arguments that you get from customer feedback.
Mm-hmm.
uh, so again, in this post COVID time, and I think it's not just COVID that has impacted this, but uh, with the likes of Amazon and Netflix and some of those FANG organizations who are pushing software at a rapid pace, and most of the companies who are basically digitally native have been doing that. But also a lot of companies who were traditionally a brick and mortar kind of companies are also doing it in an aggressive manner these days, of pushing heavily on continuous quality and rapid release cycles. So what risk and challenges do you see in there for organizations who are doing this?
Yeah, I think you need to speed up move the thing there. But we also have a question from Rohit that's very similar. are very related to the question that you just asked in terms of, um, I believe your question was about speeding up delivery. Is that right, Deepak?
Mm-hmm. Yes, correct.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I said, well, like I've said in some of the talks that I give, if you drive faster, you have a higher probability of crashing, right? That's why they have the speed limit on the highway. And so, just like anything else, we need to think about what are the things that would make us crash. Well, there'd be a curve or other cars, things like that. And in the development cycle, we also collect information on, you could think of a defect as a crash in some ways. And so that's one of the things that makes it very important to be able to classify and categorize and do a root cause analysis on the defects, and be able to really analyze them, to think about what are the things that make us crash, right? And what can we do to prevent them? And so being able to, that's really a risk assessment, right? In terms of understanding where the risks come from crashing in your car when you try to drive too fast. Now, in reference to Rohit's question, Rohit says, what is the best way to speed up the build release pipeline? And yeah, I guess that's really related to the continuous integration and continuous delivery pipeline. It's when you think about all the different parts of your pipeline and your process going from one step to the next, it's important for each organization will have different bottlenecks in that pipeline. Some organizations may have difficulty um, in the in their branches and making sure that they're um, getting the right branch. Other organizations may have difficulty in moving it from one environment to the next, and the issues and intricacies of that. So I think it's depending on the organization and the bottlenecks or slow points that you have in your pipeline. And again, a lot of that data can probably be collected as well.
Mhm. So yeah, just to add to your points, I think from a speeding up the builder's pipeline, uh, quality plays a major role, because speed without quality is a disaster as such, right? So quality plays a very, very major role there. And as I mentioned, a couple of things, or as we mentioned during the interaction, couple of things that really came up was the quality of data that you are testing, the test coverage, having adequate test coverage, in terms of automation as well. I feel also mentioned, from a manual testing perspective, exploratory testing, which also kind of helps you in terms of building up, or speeding up the entire cycle from the manual front. Automation definitely helps you in speeding it up, but automation also follows the same principle, garbage in, garbage out. If you have test cases which are not well optimized, or there are duplicates and stuff like that. We have seen uh,